Yeah, welcome to the Wimlex Show, episode number 43, presented to you by Spryker Systems, Debt Agency, and Bright Payments. Today, again, Brian Beck is our guest, talking about B2B e-commerce, success cases and unsuccess cases. So we're going to learn in this episode a lot of denominators of success in B2B and what is really happening when B2B companies are transforming into the digital world. So have fun with Brian Beck. Brian, welcome to Wimlex session number 2 after the very successful first session talking about B2B challenges, especially in e-commerce in the US, and having you giving us some insights into the US market. So what happened over there? We found a lot of similarities between the European and the US market, very interesting insights. We decided to do a second session where we focus a little bit more on specific B2B success cases in the US, and of course, reason for cases without the desired success. So, for the listeners that did skip session number 1, can you introduce yourself a little bit? Who are you? What do you do for life?
Sure. Thank you, Alex, for having me again. I appreciate it. We had a great session the first time around, and excited to be back. So I guess we had an engaging conversation. So you had me back. So thank you. So my name is Brian Beck. I'm a 22-year now veteran of the e-commerce and digital transformation field here in the United States. Most of my career, Alex, has been as an operator of e-commerce businesses for mid-sized and large companies, some e-commerce startups here in the U.S. A lot of my work in the last 5 years has been on the B2B side. So my first 17 years in the field were all in really more in the e-commerce, serving consumers, some B2B. But what I saw was, about 5 years ago, was the same kinds of opportunities that were available in the consumer side were now available on the B2B side. But yet the B2B side, in other words, companies selling business to business through e-commerce and through digital means, a lot of companies weren't there yet. They hadn't yet started. And so I, as I was getting into the field, I also decided to, I was looking for something to refer people to, my clients to, in terms of reading material. And there wasn't anything in the market, really. So I wrote a book, as of you, and I think you've written several. We put a book together. I put a book together. It took 3 or 4 years, and now I have a book entitled $1 Billion B2B E-commerce, which was published in the spring of 2020, and it's all about digital transformation for companies in the B2B field. And there's a long way to go there, as you know, Alex. Companies really taking advantage of all the aspects of digital for their business on the B2B side.
Yeah, our career parallels are stunning. So the only missing piece is that you have to found still a software company for commerce at B2B companies. So, but maybe we can find a way of working together here before you do this, because we're heading now to the US. So before we are deep diving into the success cases, I have your book in front of me on my Kindle, and there's you started your book at one of the first pages, early pages, with an Q&A session. And one of the first questions in the book is, what's the biggest challenge B2B companies are facing when it comes to e-commerce? Mm-hmm. And then your answer is, and I really like this one thing, inaction. So I don't know when you wrote this book, but from the majority of cases you see so far, and you're also very active on the consultancy side, is it still true?
No, yeah, it is true. Although, as we get into situations like the COVID-19 pandemic, that inaction is turning into action. I still hear it, though. I still hear reasons why companies, don't act, and it really ties to leadership, in my opinion. When you look at the 50% still of e-commerce or B2B companies that don't have an e-commerce capability, particularly manufacturers, and you look at why they don't, I think a lot of that ties to leadership and the sort of the inaction or unwillingness to act. And I think a lot of it is just based on fear and knowledge gaps, and just in the history. And I make this point in the book, Alex. business has been just good enough, right, for these businesses where either they're shrinking slightly, they're growing just enough, the traditional channels have been working, and they're comfortable. And when you live with that for a long time, there's not necessarily an urgent desire to change or need to change until something dramatic happens with the business, whether that's either customers saying to them, "Hey, we're not going to buy from you anymore because there's no, if you don't have e-commerce capabilities," or something like COVID-19 comes along and says, all the doors are locked, you can't get in anymore, and now you have to use digital channels to interact with your customer. And so I think COVID is the loudest call to action we've seen or heard in our lifetime for digital. And so I'm seeing movement now is what I'm saying. The urgency has gone up, and it's really dramatic in some places. So
yeah, we also invented internally the term CVP instead of MVP, Corona Viable Product. Now it really counts, and it really works, because with Corona Viable Products, you actually get rid of all this kind of lazy org layers that kind of prevents you from getting things done. So the CVP is a real MVP. That's kind of we use it sometimes.
I love that. That's great.
And then I found another in the Q&A section. I found another thing you said there, which is kind of very un-American, but I really like because it's very German. There was one question. Is it ever too late for a B2B company to add an e-commerce operations? And like from an American, very positive perspective, I would have expected, no, it's never too late. You can always act. You just have to be like faster. And you said, yeah, unfortunately, yes, it can be too late. Yeah. So, and I think you're going to refer like later in this book to the Sears example, for example, because they acted too late and too little, too late. I think that sums it up a little bit. Can this really be the case already with B2B? So are there B2B areas from your point of view that are too late already, or especially now with COVID, it is proven that they're not able to act because they didn't got even like an app or a website running in COVID? So you see too late cases in B2B already?
Well, I think you're starting to see them emerge. I think, the too late is evident in B2C, and that's what informed my response to my own question there around, at the beginning. Is it too? Yes, I think it is too late for some companies to catch up, because there's been a lot of shift already to digital channels. I look at Amazon Business, for example, on track to achieve $52 billion in revenue in their B2B channel within a few years, 2023. And so I think, that's just one example, though. I think you've got, I think the most at risk are distributors who are in the mid-market. I think if you look at the numbers, I don't have them in front of me, Alex, but if you look at the numbers of distributors in the United States, it's been shrinking. And why has it been shrinking? Well, I mean, there's a variety of reasons for that, but one reason I believe, and we'll see it through COVID, is the fact that customers are diverting their purchases to other places. They're not there's no notion of loyalty like there was. You've got during COVID, I saw a recent statistic that said 50% of customers, B2B customers, are trying new suppliers during this time. The traditional notion of loyalty has been challenged by the fact that the B2B buyer now has to go online to make purchases, and they're discovering new places and new ways to make those purchases. So is it too late? I mean, yeah, the American reply would be, no, it's never too late. Come on, get on the bus. You can do it. And you know what? In general, I still do think that's the case for a lot of companies, but I will say that for those that have resisted and have absolutely nothing in place, and if you're resource constrained, particularly in COVID, if your business is going down, your capital available is deteriorated because your business is deteriorated, it may be too late for you. I don't have any specific examples to share with you, but I do. If you look at the numbers related to the kind of the distribution counts in the U.S., you see it declining. I think you can also see it in the margins of some of the large distributors. Like if you look at the margin deterioration, for example, at Grainger, which is one of the largest MRO distributors, I think you're seeing that pressure occur where you get you've seen this with the department stores in the United States too, is kind of the leveling of the margin pressure that's been applied, and that's challenges to the business model, right? Just consumers in that case being more empowered, more choice, shifting purchases to Amazon and other places.
Okay, so let's stop with like the negativity here. Let's go to success cases.
Okay.
And you have presented some success cases in the book. I think that's important to understand, especially from a timeline perspective. So when those cases started, what did they really do? What kind of competition they faced when they started? Maybe we can start with Illumina. I think
Illumina, yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's a name, a biotech manufacturer. Can you give us a background about the company and then how they transform from your point of view into the digital reality?
Well, I use Illumina in the book several times because I think they've done a lot of things really well through that whole process. So Illumina, just to give a sense, they've been called the smartest company on the planet, and the reason they say that is they make genomics sequencing equipment. So this is equipment that sequences the human gene, or really any genome, DNA, right? And what their product does is it helps with research. It helps with all kinds of things, terrorism prevention. I mean, they have all kinds of. What it does is, this is a research equipment manufacturer, biotechnology. So they can tell you, Alex, if you have, heritage from places around the world, whether you're likely to get a certain disease. I mean, there's a whole series of things this equipment's used for. So they have this equipment they manufacture, and then they have chemistry, which goes into the equipment. These are chemicals, really. Their equipment's used by hospitals and research institutions, large universities, Stanford University, for example, use their products in research labs. And so when you think about e-commerce, and they're a public $3.5 billion company. When you think about e-commerce, this would be one of the last companies you think about, right? Like that, hey, this is, not selling shirts online. Their equipment sells for millions of dollars. And the audience for this product are researchers and procurement teams and things like that. So they're kind of an unusual, what you call typical case for e-commerce. But their journey, I think, is such an impressive way of describing how to do things well, taking a traditional B2B business, where they have salespeople calling on Stanford University, for example, and transforming it and enabling it with commerce capabilities. And it's not just about the e-commerce transaction. It's also about how do you personalize the whole experience for that researcher and for that procurement team inside that organization, so that you're delivering the right kinds of products to them. So today, and we can talk about the steps they took, but today they expect more than 50% of their business to be transacted through their e-commerce and related systems. And this is not a small company. And this is about 3 years after they launched their e-commerce and commerce enablement capabilities, which, by the way, also include things like Punch Out and EDI and some other things, but it's all tied together into a single system. It's really a compelling story. So I'm happy to go into details with you if you'd like.
So, but how could they manage to add this commerce capability while having a field force, like real people reaching out? That is, like, from what I understand from B2B, the strongest blocking force for commerce, or because whenever you talk with the director, VP of distribution or sales, it's like, no, we should not push too hard into commerce because that affects like the bonuses of our field force, and maybe go into a market where we're not active yet. That's a much better proof for e-commerce. So how did they manage this kind of org transformation?
There you go, Alex. Getting German. You're going to the negative again.
but I try, but we try to find out there must be like a common success pattern here.
I'm teasing you, but seriously, that is actually the point you raised is a really good one. It is one of the chief friction points in digital transformation and rolling out of e-commerce for B2B is that potential conflict with the sales team, because the sales team can. We talk about Illumina as really a poster child for this. This is one of the chief reasons why digital rollouts, digital commerce, e-commerce fails in B2B, is because the sales team views it as competitive. It's going to take away my commission. To your point, I don't want my client relationship shifting to a digital channel. That doesn't make any sense. It's cannibalizing my value in the organization as a sales person. When in fact, the fascinating thing is, they actually, when done well, the sales team ends up loving e-commerce. Why? Because it actually allows them to become more strategic. It actually takes the load off of them to do things like placing a repeat order that the customer places all the time, day after day. And Illumina being a good example of this. So when you buy a $5 million piece of equipment from Illumina, which does this gene sequencing process, you have to put chemicals into this machine to run experiments, right? So these are scientists. They're running experiments in these machines in their labs. And those chemicals need to be reordered because you're running experiments all the time on these machines. Well, the sales rep at Illumina doesn't want to be sitting there taking the order for the chemicals. They're ordering the same chemicals all the time, taking the same order, and then answering questions about, is my order shipped, or when's it going to be delivered? Or that's not the highest and best use of a salesperson's time. But that salesperson, when that customer places the order for the chemicals through the e-commerce platform, still gets commission on the order. So guess what? The salesperson earns more commission, right? And then they can spend their time working on strategic issues for the clients, thinking about what else do they need to be more efficient in their lab? How else can I better serve this customer? Or the salesperson now has more time to go out and find more strategic accounts they can sell to. So what it does is it levels the field for the sales force. E-commerce does. If you're not a high performing salesperson, you're going to be exposed, right? So it's an interesting evolution. Anyway, go ahead.
Is this platform? So let's think like for a moment. I have a question that where this what you do when the cake is not getting bitter. But let's take a moment here with Illumina case. Did this help them to extend, like using the platform and like to build a marketplace, for example, out of it, like selling like third party liquids like on their platform?
Chemicals. So they're not doing that. Something they've talked about during the course of my work with them. But what it has enabled them to do, Alex, importantly, is to capture more share of wallet from their customer. So if we think about the different return on investment levers, and this is in the book as well, for e-commerce, for a B2B company, one of the key ones is to make sure that you're growing your share with that customer. And in the case of Illumina, they're able to, because they understand how their customers are using this equipment in the field, right? How they're using it for research. It's tied together through Internet of Things capabilities, so they can tell how their researchers are running experiments, what chemicals might they recommend to them, and the system will do this for them. And so they've automated personalized recommendations of their B2B product. I mean, this is really, they're doing more than a lot of the consumer side is doing, because they have real connection to the customer, and they understand and tie their recommendations to the business outcome of the customer or the productivity of the experiment in the lab. And so they have demonstrated that they have been able to lift the share of wallet. In other words, they're able to sell more product to the customer. And it's not just about the sale. I mean, it's not just one-sided or self-serving. The customer benefits because they're able to get a better outcome from their experiments by using the right mix of chemicals. Don't ask me about the chemical mix because I'm not a research scientist.
But, I got it.
But the concept is you get the concept.
Yeah, I got it. So, but in this case, so okay, the case is fine for me, but the cake grew much bigger. So it was like e-commerce added like another cake, I would say. But in lots of cases in B2B, actually, let's name it. You have to replace the people that are on the field because it doesn't make any sense anymore. Because the relationship can be transferred into like a CRM system and usually much better served because the system knows better what was ordered last time. The system knows better what might be an add-on order next time. So, have you seen cases where a transformation was managed successfully, where you where the, let's say, the cake stayed stable?
I like your analogy. So, what I've seen, Alex, is to that point is redeployment of within a company. I mean, look, if there's efficiency gains from e-commerce, right? When the customer can go online and see their own order status, or answer questions about products, or see if there's inventory available, or if things are compatible with each other. Those things replace calls to the call center. I'll give you so there's some efficiency gains, certainly, and by that means you may not hire as many people. Maybe you shift roles. Maybe some people move out of the company. What I found interesting, even in mid-market companies, not the size of Illumina, but $100 million, $200 million companies, is really that shift of resources. And I'll give you an example. I was working with about $100 million machine tools manufacturer. They make equipment that is used in machining shops to create different products like sheet metal and steel and fabrication. And they supply OEMs, they supply companies that make products, and they make the machines that do this, CNC machines. And one of the things that he told me was that they were able to, through his e-commerce effort, take some of his customer service staff and pull them into out of a reactive role, which was people calling and say, "Hey, where's my order? Answer my question about this," and he put them into a proactive role. And by that I mean he said, "I'm going to have these folks now calling my customers to make sure we're meeting their needs, that we're deepening the relationship, that we're offering things we didn't, that they may not know we offer." And he turned his team, I think it was about 4 or 5 people. He still had some customer service, but he turned a subset of them into these agents who were actually out, more acting like success managers for his company, to make sure his customers were happy with their experience, deepening the relationships. And so I'm seeing that kind of behavior happen. And then look, if in some cases, sure, there's some shift from the traditional call center, for example, to to e-commerce, and sometimes that means a reduction in headcount. But I've seen more the opposite, what I just described earlier.
Okay, then let's take another example. Maybe we find we find a loophole in the next one. One example I was thinking about is lots of companies I see in B2B, they actually deny an e-commerce project because they don't want to have any transparency about prices. So there are like huge niches, huge business opportunities where you say, okay, we can put it online. But eventually, without prices, it doesn't make any sense, because then you have still like this lock-in kind of barrier, and there's no economies of scale behind. There's no network effects. Have you seen this a lot in the US too?
Yeah, for sure. So
how do you solve it?
Well, yeah, no, good question. So number one, we see it, but it's somewhat legacy thinking, right? So if I may, as we look back at the retail sector here in the U.S., that whole channel conflict issue related to price and manufacturers selling direct to consumers, brands selling direct to consumers, that was a big debate 15 years ago in the consumer side here in the U.S. And we've seen what's happened since then, right? So, a lot of brands now selling directly to consumers. They're publishing prices. I mean, they're selling on their websites. So B2B today here in the US, and you probably see this in Europe as well, is in some ways similar to where we were in consumer 15 years ago, which is the manufacturers are saying, I don't want to expose my price or any pricing of any type. Maybe I have some, I don't want to let my competitors know what I charge, things like that. So it's a real issue. So I think there's two answers to your question. How do you solve it? One is that the market itself, I think, is going to evolve in the U.S. with businesses and they are going to start seeing the benefits of actually, exposing and going direct as a manufacturer to the consumer or to the business buyer, right? And so I think that's just naturally going to happen as the opportunities, as the breadth and size of the opportunity becomes more and more apparent to the manufacturers, the B2B manufacturers. I think that in and of itself is going to start. Leadership is going to, it already is, saying, listen, we can't allow all of our channels to dictate everything to our end buyer. We need to start engaging directly, and that includes pricing. The second thing is that it's not an all or nothing, right? And you know this, Alex. You guys implement these systems. It's in the world of B2B e-commerce, there's also contract pricing and other things. So what I see companies doing here in the U.S. is they'll go out with a price, which is a kind of a list price, a high price if something's exposed to the public, but then behind a login, they'll expose the contract price or some other type of pricing to their specific customers in a one-to-one basis, and the systems will support that. I'm sure you guys support that one-on-one login pricing, so that you don't have the conflict, or you don't, the competitor doesn't see the pricing, or other customers don't see the pricing. So, there are other ways to game that, I'm sure, but at the end of the day, it's that's what we see.
But the problem with this kind of one-on-one pricing is that's not usually restricted by the systems like Spryker or other systems. Like, it's restricted by the internal organization, because sometimes it's like the responsible salesperson for, let's say, you have like the Brian Beck B2B commerce business, yeah. So he has a special discount for you, 2.6% on every second order, something like that, like written on a paper, stored in this desk. Only he knew about it. So,
right.
So when the system is like processing this order automatically, you're not getting this 2.6%. You know about it, and the salesperson then you're getting upset. And this is making this whole transformation stuff so complicated because nobody followed rules in the past, because there was no system that led to transparency. So there's like in German there's a proverb saying like the devil is living in the detail. I don't know if this proverb.
Devil's in the details. Yeah, we say that too.
It's true. It's true in the S. Okay, let's focus on another success case here. So it got a little bit too German here. Let's look at another success case. You mentioned in your book, Kelly Paper.
Oh, sure.
It's a commercial paper conglomerate. So it's like they're selling just paper, so or what is it? Because the paper market overall, as I learned in another workshop, has some challenges, because there's less paper consumption than a couple of years ago, and it's like shrinking.
Yeah. So, a couple things about the paper market. So, Kelly Paper is a privately held division of one of the largest paper companies in the United States, a company called Central National Goatsman. And I think it's Goatsman is the proper name. At any rate, they're a very large paper conglomerate, several billion in sales. Kelly Paper is a division on the western half of the United States. The paper market is interesting because it is highly, as you know, number one, there's a lot of just overall trends in that market, as you mentioned, Alex, where there's less paper usage. I mean, as people become more and more digital, things shift to digital means. It's people are, they're printing less. Newspapers are shifting to digital formats, et cetera. So there's tremendous competitive pressure in that market. And so if you're trying to win share in a declining market, so small increases in efficiency. It's also a very commoditized market. So small increases in efficiency, small increases in how you serve your customer can be very impactful. And that's the reason I highlighted Kelly Paper in the book. Is because they were able to, through some digital efforts, create some real nice business results. So they provide paper that's printed on by like the LA Times, for example, right? Newspaper. They provide business to business selling services to, and their products to, commercial printers of postcards and business cards and things like that. So they provide a variety of different paper. They've also gotten into a bit of the packaging industry. So, the sort of cardboard packaging, and that actually is a growth area because of all the growth in e-commerce. So, what do they do? The principal lesson from them and what's in the book is really about making the information necessary in a commodity transaction available quickly and easily to the buyer. And that in their world, it's about availability of product, when it can be delivered, and actually less so about price. And what they found is that by enabling those quick access to that information, they've been live with the system probably 5 years now, so they were relatively early to the market with this. But by doing that, they were able to achieve higher gross margins through sales done through e-commerce. They have about half of their sales now that come from e-commerce. And they do it in a way, and they do it in part. One of the things they found is that because the call never happens to the salesperson, there's never an opportunity to even receive a discount. You know, the sales folks would give discounts. Just, hey, Joe, here's your 2% off, just because you don't want to keep your business. But the convenience and the speed at which the customer can find the product availability, delivery information, et cetera, and get them the product quickly and to the right place on a defined date outweighed the price. And so they were actually able to charge 3% more. And that additional gross margin goes right to the bottom line of their company. So in a commodity business, it highlights the importance of the reason people buy through e-commerce. It's about convenience and speed and ease of use, more so than price. And that's been documented in studies, but this is a case where it's come to life.
But let's stick with Kelly for another minute. Do you think this kind of strategy will eventually help them to survive? Because the overall challenges of the industry are huge. Just the e-commerce uptake won't help them, so more demand from e-commerce. And you have in this kind of businesses, as I know them, and I did like 1 or 2 workshops with like paper companies. The legacy in those companies is huge, so there's they eventually have to stick to paper. Otherwise, they have to become like a tech company. But that's maybe that's not the fortune of Kelly here. So, from what you've seen from Kelly, so is this really the way how they can win and become like the next, let's say, okay, Uber or Amazon of paper? I wanted to say WeWork, but it's not a success case anymore. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, no, it's a good question, Alex. I mean, look, I think we have to recognize that digital and e-commerce is not in and of itself something that's going to necessarily save an industry or save a particular type of company. Not save is maybe not the right word, but in and of itself, e-commerce and digital is a strategy, but it's really an enablement. It's a fundamental component of doing business. And in and of itself, it's not necessarily a strategy unless you are a digitally native brand or someone who's more in that, started with digital and that's your whole business. For traditional B2B companies, e-commerce is it has become a necessary part of doing business, and most businesses aren't there still. I mean, most, about 50% in the U.S. So I think to answer your question, is this effort Kelly's doing in and of itself going to shift the fundamental nature of people using less paper? Absolutely not. What it does, though, is it gives them a foundation to now meet the customer's needs in other things, like I mentioned, packaging, right? So let's say, for example, that Kelly was looking to embrace other growing markets like they're doing. These are things that when you have an e-commerce capability, presence, and you have muscle in the organization that understands it, you can then use that muscle and that capability and platform in these new markets as you get into them. So is it going to in and of itself, save the business? No. I'm not projecting Kelly's going to go out of business. They're not. But in a commoditized business, and we're using them as an example, it's a necessary part of being in business, and it's a necessary part of being evolving the business to meet the customer expectations as you get into new, sort of corporate strategies and product sets and things. Ultimately, it's about meeting the customer expectation, having something the customer wants and needs, right? So, Illumina, for example, that their product is there. I mean, it's allowing them, e-commerce, to better serve their customer. But the reason the customer is there is because their product is fantastic. It's the global leader they're the global leader in their category and what they do.
So eventually every company goes out of business, but it's a question of time, as
Well,
Jeff Bezos
as Jeff Bezos says, yes.
So,
Right.
so apart from COVID-19 being the driver of such transformational, and COVID-19 was not the driver of your success cases from the book. The book was published before COVID.
Correct.
But apart from COVID-19 being the driver of transformation, one thing that is often discussed, like in European conferences, that B2B and Amazon, that's already like a big thing. So from what you've seen, so paper is really special, heavy B2B heavy industry. Is this really the case? So is Amazon in the US already like a driver for B2B commerce?
Yeah. So in addition, Alex, to my work in writing books and doing advisory work and such, I own a company with a business partner that we do work on Amazon and Amazon Business specifically. We run programs for mid-market and large B2B manufacturers, mainly B2B. And so, firsthand, I spent a lot of time with the teams at Amazon Business. I spend a lot of time with companies working on their Amazon strategy. And so I can tell you firsthand, being in the trenches with these businesses, that Amazon is absolutely not only creating urgency for action, the inaction thing we talked about, but also is really changing the dynamics of the selling marketplace here in the U.S. So Amazon Business, as I mentioned earlier, is growing tremendously, and it's fascinating, Alex. When you look at the numbers, there was a report that came out a few months back that showed the product counts of Amazon Business in these B2B categories versus the largest distributors in these categories. So take a category like fasteners, right? Fasteners, traditional B2B, screws, nuts, bolts, things like that, right? The largest traditional distributor of fasteners, has something like 500,000 products on its website. And the Amazon Business has about 1.4 million fasteners on its website. So when you think about the traditional value proposition distributors have to the marketplace here in the U.S., they are largely based on price and selection, right? So if you're being outgained in terms of selection by Amazon Business, what does that say about your competitive advantage, right? So Amazon Business, for example, it's not just about paper products or office products, things like that, where people assume it's most of their B2B volume. In fact, it's not. It's in a lot of other categories. In 2019, Amazon Business did $2 billion worth of dental products through its B2B marketplace. Dental products. They're selling regulated products, Class 2 medical devices, which are FDA certified products that require a medical license to use through Amazon Business. They're doing things that the traditional distribution channels are not doing in some cases, and they're poised to be a real, and they already are a real influencing a real shift in B2B selling channels through e-com. So short answer to your question.
What was your advice then for Kelly Paper? Let's say they establish a new B2B or B2C product line. Would you advise them to sell on Amazon?
Absolutely. So the implications of Amazon Business are different for your type of business. If you're a manufacturer and your product stands on its own, in other words, you really differentiate based on the qualities of that product, I believe Amazon Business is an evolution of your selling channels, and it should be embraced. In other words, it's a distributor. It's a new type of distributor. They have different rules. They have different ways of doing business. You have to understand that when you go into it. But they're a distributor, and their customers' preferences are shifting there. If you're if you are a distributor, though, it has different implications for you. And we work with some distributors as well on Amazon. Number one, you need to understand what they're doing because they're setting the bar for your customer for e-commerce. But also, it provides an opportunity for you to, with the right strategy, to actually leverage that growth, to actually work with them, learn from them, but also capture sales. Particularly if you have good supplier relationships with manufacturers, you can go back to your manufacturers and suppliers and say to them, listen, I'm going to enable you on Amazon. I want to be your Amazon department, right? I want to be your Amazon arm. And I want you to give me, the rights to do that as one of the few distributors who's authorized. And that, as a business model, we're implementing with a couple of different distributors in a couple categories. Industrial products is one, for example. And that's working successfully because in some cases, manufacturers want to be able to defer to the distributor for things like service, even on Amazon orders. So if you got a customer who is savvy with service and support, they can support those Amazon orders with follow-on. And so if there's real value add to the distributor, they can participate in that value chain with Amazon with the manufacturer. Does that make sense?
Yes and no. So 2 years ago, I probably would have agreed. Today, so one of my main mantras is you have to own customer success, because eventually, if you don't own customers, if you don't have access to the customer, you will become like a logistics platform, a provider. So without any chance to differentiate on product or product margin. And whenever you help Amazon to become more potent in your category, the more you help customers to educate on that even this category, this complicated medical dental stuff can be ordered on Amazon, the harder it will get in the future to own the direct access back from the customer. So I totally align. I'm aligned with you, saying yes, you can use Amazon as a platform to elevate your own processes, and then like in parallel build your own commerce platform with like a long-term strategy. I've described like 8 years ago in a keynote. First time Amazon is a prisoner's dilemma. Yeah, so when you are in the prisons, it is a prisoner's dilemma. So you can get out. If your category is in, you can try to get out of the prison, but then still the sales are in the prison, right? So you have to stay in the prison, and the only chance is to become the best prisoner, which is still it's a shithole position, right? Because in general, you don't want to be the prisoner; you want to be free.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, I mean, Alex, to react to that, I mean, that's a great point. Look, this is the nuances of an Amazon strategy, I think, are different for every company, and a lot of it depends on what their really strength is. So, first, let me say, Amazon shouldn't be is not an e-commerce strategy in and of itself, in my opinion. Amazon is a part of an e-commerce strategy, right? To your point.
Here. I like to say in your
here. That's right. You're here. We need a drink here. But yes, I agree with you wholeheartedly that the customer relationship is very important. I think actually that's what's driving a lot of this transformation. The understanding that the customer's needs have changed, and that they now want that relationship to be enabled digitally. So first and foremost, I think I completely agree with you. The Amazon is a part of a strategy, not the entire strategy. Okay, so I agree with you there. That said, I would challenge the notion that you're also can't two things. You can't control, my opinion, the customer's preferences in terms of where they research and shop. So in the U.S., we're seeing tremendous gains in search preference shifting to Amazon. So Amazon being a search engine, really, the statistic is 70% of product searches in the United States start on Amazon, not on Google, not on other places, and that's increasingly happening in B2B. So you've got this search engine out there that if you're not positioned in it in some way, you're risking your relevance, and you're allowing other people into the conversation. So, and here's a great example. I was on the phone 2 weeks ago with one of the largest abrasive tools manufacturers in this. Actually, they're not even a U.S. based company, but we were looking at their tools on Amazon, and we were looking at searches around so we searched like abrasive grinder or something like that, right? It's a traditional tool. Expensive tools used in industrial type commercial applications. And when we searched the general terms, Alex, when we looked at, abrasive grinder, we were looking at a whole series of manufacturers they had never heard of. And they've been in this business for 150 years or something, and it's a long time. So they have their list of manufacturers they think about as competitors. these are new products, and some of them were selling millions of dollars a year, individual products. So that I raise that point because the dynamics are shifting, and if you're not in the conversation at all on Amazon, you're risking that shift away from your product, right?
Yeah. So
The prisoner's dilemma. There you go.
We will come to the last question in a minute, but I have to do like this small anecdote here, because this reminds me on one. I had like one workshop. This was like 12, 13 years ago, where main product searches were still happening on Google, not on Amazon.
Right.
And then we told the board of directors that, when you search for this kind of fashion stuff they are selling, they are not showing up your company, but they show up like Zalando in Germany. And then because they did a much better job on like optimizing for Google. And then the answer of one of the board members was, but Mr. Graf, so that only shows that Google is working incorrect. So because we are still number one.
I love that. That's right.
That is, So and that leads me to my last question for this episode. What are the one or two things that B2B companies must have in place before launching like B2B commerce effort? And maybe it has something to do with the org chart itself.
It sure does. So I think you pulled that right out of the book there, Alex. So I think that, the number one thing is the leadership commitment. And so when you don't have the corporate spot, like the top level, the CEO talking about this, or the board, and behind it fully, it does not succeed because you have to change the way in B2B companies, the way that they think about things. You have to create some uncomfortable situations. We talked about the sales team, right? Even the marketing team, even the fulfillment capabilities. And you just, a traditional B2B company is shipping things in bulk, for example, on a PO, they're shipping 50 cases of something over here, 1,000 cases over there. In the world of e-commerce, B2B e-commerce, you're breaking that down into smaller shipments, individual shipments. You're probably supporting smaller customers through e-commerce. It shifts a lot of things in the organization. And when business has been just good enough for 50 or 100 years, or it's been good, it takes real leadership to power through that. The change that's necessary. It also ties into who you bring in to help support you. So oftentimes I'll find that companies will hire, I make the joke in the book, their 24-year-old nephew, because they know how to code computers, write computer code. But it's not about that. You have to give your leader real executive authority and align them with a P&L. And what I see a lot of companies here doing is hiring out of B2C.
But when it happened in B2C 10 years ago, the nephew was 14. So at least it's
that's right.
It's still the same nephew.
That's right. It's the same nephew.
But he already fucked up B2C, so it's like there's still some learning curve behind it.
That's
so,
right.
So from what I heard so far, it's like we are getting to the end of this episode. I expect that's not the last session we can have on B2B. There are success cases. There are a lot more traps than success cases in the market. So for the one that really want to learn about these traps, read the book. I really can recommend it. I will really looking forward into what kind of success cases we're going to see in the future. Usually I close when I do like keynotes or workshop. I say, okay, it will never be as easy as it is today, because people are looking for an easy strategy in the future. So it only gets harder. So for the one that are listening right now, act rather today than tomorrow. Brian, thank you for your time. It was a really entertaining session, and see you hopefully in the third episode in the future.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex, for having me. It was fun.